Hello. So for a while we talked about maybe trying to have lunch at noon, right? And it didn't work. But so despite what I told you at breakfast, lunch will be at 12:30, but we're not going to go all the way up till 12:30. We'll have some nice time here together this morning and have a break. Then lunch, and then come back for the shocktified. I think that is a new word. I think you did make up a new word. Shocktified ceremony. So it's great. How are you all? Good. I think I got on Maui time just today. I woke up at what would be a normal time instead of like 3 in the morning, thinking I'm in New York. So it's kind of in time to leave, which is par for the course. I'm speaking somewhere in LA at I think 11:30 LA time on Tuesday, leaving here on Monday, so I'll be half asleep, no doubt. Oh my God, it's the middle of the night. But it's happened before, so hopefully I'll pull it off. So, loving kindness. The word in Pali, the language of the original Buddhist text, is metta, M-E-T-T-A. I don't know how many of you were aware when the then LA Laker player Ron Artest, right, officially changed his name to Metta World Peace. Same metta, M-E-T-T-A. And there's a little bit of a kind of media flurry at the time, and everyone got really excited, especially me. And then I guess last year or 2 years ago, he's still an LA Laker, and he behaved somewhat badly on the court or something. He behaved badly somewhere, and so Krishna Das and all these people were sending me real headlines from the newspaper, like, Metta's gone bad. Metta's let us down, or something like that. But he's since become a New York Knick, I believe, because all these people have sent me emails saying, we've got to go to a Knicks game, which I have not yet done. I assume he's still there. And I certainly wish him well, because he's a being, but also because he's carrying forth that name. So there was a time when I really hoped for the word metta to enter the culture the way, of course, some words do. Because I find it so hard to translate, so hard to really, really describe. The common translation is loving kindness. It is that sense of deeply knowing our lives are connected. We have something to do with one another. It doesn't mean we like somebody. But there is that deep knowing. An example that I tend to use a lot comes from my friend Bob Thurman, very New York. He says, imagine you're in a subway and these Martians come and they zap the subway car so that those of you who are in that subway car are going to be together forever. He says, what do? If somebody's hungry, you feed them. If somebody's freaking out, you try to calm them down. Not because you necessarily like them or you approve of them in any way, but you know you're going to be together forever. So guess what? There's a deep truth to that. Our lives have something to do with one another, and the acknowledgement of that is the sense of metta. Loving kindness is sort of an odd phrase, isn't it? Because except for an unusual place, perhaps like Maui, you wouldn't necessarily be in a cafe and hear people at the next table talking about loving kindness. So my concern is that might make the quality itself seem sort of arcane and removed from day-to-day life and precious in the negative sense of the word, instead of a really vital, alive sense of connection. Our lives have something to do with one another. Some people, including Bob actually, as a scholar, as a translator, really urge just using the word love. He'll kind of say, like, don't be so timid, just say love. That's what you actually mean. But that I find very complex, isn't it? Because we can use the word love in so many different ways. Like, what does it mean, actually, when we're saying that? You know, why does Sai Ramdas feel the need to qualify it as unconditional love? It's because sometimes when we talk about love, we really frankly mean a medium of exchange. Like, I will love you as long as you love me in return, as long as the following 15 conditions are met. And once I was teaching somewhere, probably New York, and someone in the room didn't like that, and they called out, only 15 conditions, you know? What about the rest? So I will love you as long as, you know, 150 conditions are met. I will love myself as long as I never make a mistake. You know, we know that state quite well. And we also know its frailty, its fragility, its vulnerability. So it's not really what we mean by metta, which can sustain us, can uphold us, can give us a sense of resiliency, that kind of vaster connection, no matter what situation we might be in. Sometimes we use the word love, and it really is a kind of sentimentality. It's often used that way, right? And I remember years ago, I read an interview with a former beauty queen. She was like Ms. Kentucky of many, many years ago. So like, you know, 30, 40, 50 years, something like that after her reign. I read this interview with her. And she was asked, what do you have to say about life? And she said, I'm so tired. I'm so tired of smiling. You know, so it's like 30 or 40 years just smiling for the camera, completely vacuous, disconnected to any inner reality, whatever it might have been. And that can be what comes to mind when we hear that word, like repressing more difficult feelings and trying to deny them and somehow pretend we're in a space that we're actually not. And so metta really doesn't mean any of that. The closest literal translation is friendship. So it's a sense of friendship with ourselves and with all beings. But we also define friendship in different ways, right? And so I keep coming back to connection. It's just this deep knowing that our lives are connected. And the corollary to that is that everybody counts. Everybody matters. We're not going to like everybody. We're not going to take everybody home with us. We're not going to give everybody what they want. But everybody matters in some way. So I was teaching in Washington, D.C., as I fairly often do. And the rental facility for that particular series of day-long workshops was an elementary school which had the rules of kindness of that school. And these big pieces of paper all along the corridors. So whenever we took a break or we were doing walking meditation, which we're going to do some of today, instead of actually doing the meditation, we'd all kind of stand there and read the rules of kindness because they were just so cool. And they included things like, don't hurt anyone on the inside or on the outside. But my very, very favorite rule of kindness was, everybody gets to play. Like, everybody gets to play. Not everybody is your best friend, but everybody gets to play. So that's kind of the sensibility of loving kindness. Everybody counts. Everybody matters, including oneself. The companion quality to that is compassion. So compassion, some people define compassion as love which recognizes suffering or adversity. I just said that for you, Rocky. Love which recognizes adversity or suffering. And it's a kind of tenderness, that state of compassion, which resonates and responds. So it's not just sensing a difficult situation or likely painful situation, but it's an ability to move toward. And in moving toward, also not being engulfed, right? It's having some sense of perspective or wisdom, or equanimity, we would say, balance. The balance that's born of wisdom, which is like perspective, that kind of keeps us going in that state of compassion, so that we don't get engulfed, we don't get overwhelmed. We don't define somebody perhaps only as their suffering, including ourselves, right? Our condition, our problem, or dilemma, but understand there's also a bigger reality. I think Ramdas talked about this the first night we were here together, when he also talked about getting over self-pity, right, in order to have like that bigger sense and ability to give. So in a lot of ways, the examples of these, of loving kindness or metta and compassion, they're often talked about as practices of generosity. It is gift giving, it's offering. Now, why do we take the time with a stranger to listen, rather than be just thinking about the email we need to send or where we'd rather be? You know, how do we actually arrive to not try to fix it for somebody, perhaps, but be there and be a real presence and opening, a sense of open space with that person who's in trouble? How do we respond differently when we've made a mistake, or we need to bounce back, we need some kind of resiliency? These are all examples of like a generosity of the spirit. And I'm intrigued by kind of the momentary nature sometimes of transformation. It's like we can get there and we lose it, but we can get back there, right? All is not lost when we've gone far, far away, when we've put a big price tag on our presence or our attention. We can realize that. We can make that flip. And those moments when we really arrive and we are listening and we're open and we care, they're not inconsequential because they don't last. You know, sometimes we think, well, I blew it, forget that connection or friendship or whatever it is, but we can come back. You know, that's like the essential teaching, is like we can renew, we can return, we can start over. And sometimes there's work to be done, you know, in that process. There's no doubt, but that's a possibility. And somebody asked me why I said yesterday that I hardly ever use the word forgiveness. So this is a feat of mindfulness, I remembered that. The reason, it's not that I have anything against forgiveness, really. It's just that word is tremendously loaded for us and has all kinds of possible associations. And is very difficult, I think, to understand from within and be able to differentiate that state from any other state that might kind of resemble it on the surface, but be really very different when we look. And all of these very positive, uplifting, joyous qualities are looked at in that light. Like, what can masquerade as this? What can we fall into that's what's classically called the near enemy? On the surface it looks the same, but when we really look, whoa, that's different. So I think forgiveness has a lot of near enemies. And as my friend Sylvia Borstein would say in a cautionary note, she'd say, forgiveness is not amnesia. You know, it doesn't mean that what happened didn't happen. It doesn't mean it didn't matter or it doesn't still matter. It's not any of that. But in the Buddhist teaching, it's something along these lines of recognizing the potential for change, our own and others. It's not that someone has changed, it's not that we know that, but there's always that possibility, that sensibility. It's also recognizing if it's someone else who's hurt us in some way, that we can give over an awful lot of our life's energy to somebody else. And we might well want to recapture that and feel whole and not so bound into someone else's negativity. When it's ourselves, it's kind of the same thing. There's this very interesting distinction in the Buddhist psychology between what we might call remorse and what we might call guilt. it's like, also in reference to what we were talking about yesterday or the day before, there's, when we've acted in a way that's out of harmony, it hurts us, even if we don't feel the hurt. At the time, the Buddha said, I think really beautifully, he said, if you really loved yourself, you'd never harm another. If you really loved yourself, you'd never harm another, because we have such a small, meager idea of what a human life can be and what we're capable of. But if we really loved ourselves, we would never harm another, because it just harms us. It just brings us down. And we feel a lot of that through the process of introspection. But there's a difference between recognizing like we've acted out of harmony, feeling the pain of that, acknowledging that, in effect forgiving ourselves, and moving on in a really energized way. Like, I don't need to go there again. Maybe I learned some things. And then there's a distinction between that and what is in that psychological system called guilt, where we just go over and 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 over a few more times the thing we did or the thing we said, and it's like our whole sense of who we are and all that will ever be just collapses around that, and that doesn't serve anybody, because we end up exhausted, depleted, discouraged, demoralized. We don't have a whole bunch of energy to move on and make a difference or be different. And so it's an intricate, powerful exploration. Like, how do I change? How have I, been able to move on in a better way? Is it by, one more recitation of the terrible thing I did, or is it something else? And what is that something else? And what are the components of it? And so it's very personal. That's why the idea of forgiveness is kind of compulsory is sort of off-putting, I think. Like, too static a notion, that there is this one particular thing and this is what it means, whereas it's a really intricate, movable, very powerful process, which does not mean amnesia, and it doesn't mean we pretend, no, it doesn't matter. No, it's something else altogether that is based on compassion for ourselves as well as for others. So because it takes a whole huge long time to try to explore it, I don't tend to use the word because it's not that easy. I had a really funny experience in the Buddhist monastic system. Often there's almost like a ceremony of forgiveness as a way of saying goodbye. And as I said earlier, like at my own center, the Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts, we brought this Burmese meditation teacher, Sayadaw U Pandita, to teach a 3-month retreat in 1984. And there's a lot of etiquette and protocol and just kind of basic rules in taking care of a monk or nun. And they don't eat after noon, and there's a certain way of offering food, and only certain places they can sleep, and they don't handle money. So if you've got a limo picking them up in Boston and they need to have a credit card, you're out of luck. There's just a lot of stuff to make it all work. And Sayadaw U Pandita came to America. That was his first trip to America. And as I've maybe also made some reference to, in those cultures, the nature of the teacher-student relationship, it's a very traditional culture. So if your meditation teacher, for example, makes a suggestion to you about your practice, you don't really say, "Show me why," or "I don't think so," or "Prove it," But here we do, of course, right? So U Pandita came to America, never having been here before, and I was sitting that retreat. I was meditating. Silent, it was a silent retreat, but I could just sense there was a lot going on. That he was confronted by a lot of things surprising to him, in the way people were relating to him, and I could tell that the organization, even though it's my own, was struggling to accommodate his needs, because I noticed for one thing, like, he's moving all the time. He's like sleeping in a different place, you know, like week after week. Why is that? Or at one point they built a wall in this corridor. And I thought, that's like the oddest thing, you know. I went up the stairs and suddenly there's a wall. I thought, what's that about? You know, and it was all trying to come to terms with the rules. So anyway, I could just tell there was a lot going on. So the end of 3 months, where I'd been, you know, just a silent, between ourselves, talking to him, but meditative for all those months. He gets up to say goodbye. It's the last session, and he starts out with, if I've hurt or harmed you in any way, knowingly or unknowingly, I ask your forgiveness. And if you have hurt or harmed me, knowingly or unknowingly, I forgive you. And it was like such a moment, you know, and by then I found out what was going on, you know, it was the last day. And I thought, wow, like even though he and I had a tremendous relationship and he was enormously important for me as a teacher, even in the first 3 months, I had such a sense of relief inside. I thought, wow, should I meet him again? I don't have to approach him really timidly, thinking, oh, he's going to look at me and think, oh, you're the one who started that center, you know, where they don't even know how to treat a Buddhist monk. Nor would I look at him and think, oh, well, you're the one who came to America, no idea what to expect, you know, could have prepared. And that we could actually meet, and it could be like a free moment, right? Okay, here we are, now. Without such a sense of all that accumulated baggage. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. A year later, I went to Nepal to sit with him for a month, and then 3 months in Burma, which was where I began my loving kindness practice. You know, so the idea of forgiveness there has that sense of, okay, I want to be here now. Is there something I can let go of? Not to damage myself or anybody else, but so they don't have that sense of like constant accumulation of something else. Can there be something really new here? So I love all of these concepts because they're not what they seem. You know, they can seem so superficial or gooey or something, but when you actually look, it's such a tremendous challenge to us, and all the assumptions that we make about happiness, about strength, about love, about ourselves, about others, about it's a dog-eat-dog world, you know, all of those things. And so here we are, you know, with that opportunity to make that kind of exploration. Why do we? All kinds of reasons. Sometimes it is adversity, it just is suffering. It's like, whoa. I was just kind of going along and I was fine and everything was fine, and then there's this, which is like a jolt to our system. And sometimes it's inspiration. We meet someone, we have a kind of contact. The example that's used sometimes is like you're sitting in a dark and closed room and the door's shut and something happens. And like the door just swings open and you go, whoa. It's a bigger world than I had ever thought or imagined. And sometimes that is. It's the ability, or it's the circumstance. You know, you encounter somebody, you encounter something, a place, a work of art, a piece of music, whatever it is, it's like, whoa, look at that. It's a bigger world than I might have imagined. And from that moment of inspiration, or when it's suffering, it's like the door blowing open, there is the opportunity to make it real, to embody it, to live it, to, you know, as Ramdas said, move from seeing love to being love. And when I added, that's something we can do. I don't really think that's a far off, nearly impossible goal, but likely we can only do it for a few moments. And then we forget, but that's okay, because we can remember, and we can start over. We can start over, and we can start over. And that's what practice is actually considered to be, is that amazing opportunity to breathe life into something instead of just hold it as a kind of abstract value. And we have fun, as I said. So even in terms just of loving kindness practice, there are ways we practice doing sitting meditation, there are ways we practice doing walking meditation, which I thought we could start with today, and we'll come back and do a sitting and just have time for questions. But it's basically being wherever we are. You can do it walking. You actually don't even need to be walking, and certainly not if that's a kind of physical stress for you in any way. But it means taking some practice and bringing it into an ordinary activity, something we do just usually in a mechanical way. Like often when we're walking, I mean, even in a stunningly beautiful place like this, we could be walking to our car and not notice anything around us, right? Because we're consumed with, I wonder where the nearest gas station is, you know, and how much gas, and there's a rental car, so I'm not totally sure how much gas I have left. And I think this car has a little voice that when things get really dire, you know, the little voice tells you things are bad now. Just about run out of gas, but you know, I wonder how close that is to the end. And just like, right? And then you're at the car and you haven't noticed anything along the way. And it's not like fruitful planning, like, oh, I better, you know, remember to find a gas station. We just kind of go, maybe I'll open a gas station on my own. Wouldn't that be a great thing to do for the next phase of my life, you know, right? And so, using something, whatever it is, as a way to make that journey to your car not just a waste of time or a kind of transition, but a very alive experience. Sometimes we do it through mindfulness, just pay attention to where you are, feel your feet against the ground. Look around, and when you see your mind going to, you know, maybe I'll have a chain of gas stations on Maui, come back. You know, come back to the moment. Sometimes we do it if you want to experiment with loving kindness. And what that would involve is, because we use phrases, remember, as the kind of resting place for one's attention, maybe just walking along, normal pace. You don't have to slow down and look weird, although here, of course, you could, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to. Because this is also something where training, in effect, to take into a, you know, more public arena if we're just walking down the street somewhere or whatever it might be, or we're at work or walking from one room to another. You don't really want to like slow down to that crawl that people sometimes do in doing mindfulness in walking. So, but you know, like bring your attention, bring your energy into your body. And eyes open, remember? And this is the silent repetition of certain phrases. So maybe you're walking along and a very light awareness is resting on, may I be happy, may I be peaceful. Like I would suggest offering the phrases to yourself as the kind of baseline. May I be happy, be peaceful. Be happy, be peaceful, something like that. And then when someone comes strongly into view, you see a person walking by, you hear a bird, you see a little creature, a little bug. Just for a few moments, include them like, oh, be happy. And then go back to resting your attention on the phrases for yourself. And so this is, you know, it can't be like a tight, exclusive focus because you're just going to barge into trees and one another. You want to be aware of everything. Like really wide open, but you have this resting place. You have like this touchstone for your awareness that you can lightly be aware of. And then play as you expand. And it's a very interesting way, I swear, to walk down the streets of New York. It really is fun. I do that a lot, and every once in a while somebody coming in the other direction gives me this really big smile, and I think, oh, maybe they're doing it too. We've got a little secret love club going on here. So it's really like meta in action, and we can just play, okay? And you can also have a break within that time if you want. So why don't we take about 20 minutes or so and just go out and do that and experiment with that, and then we'll come back and we'll have a sitting session.